Aelric Calloway didn't want to be here. Hell, he didn't want to be anywhere near here. But as his ship closed in on the space cathedral orbiting the neutron star, the crushing weight of inevitability pressed down on him harder than the artificial gravity in the docking bay. The cathedral, a mishmash of alien architecture that looked like someone had let a schizophrenic octopus design a Gothic cathedral, loomed large, all spires and sinister curves. He wondered how many unpaid miners' labor went into creating the grotesque thing. Probably too many. The Harkar Dominion ran the mining ops here, and when things went south, as they inevitably did when you mixed desperate humans and oppressive aliens, they called for a mediator. Enter Aelric Calloway, pacifist extraordinaire, savior of those who couldn't save themselves. Or at least that's what the brochure said. The docking bay doors yawned open, and Aelric stepped out, immediately assaulted by the acrid tang of burnt metal and something faintly reminiscent of despair. The bay was a hive of activity, with human workers darting about like ants on a sugar high, each wearing expressions that suggested they were perpetually on the edge of a nervous breakdown. Aelric adjusted his coat, trying to look more confident than he felt. His footsteps echoed sharply on the metallic floor, a sound that screamed his presence to the universe, or at least to the few disinterested souls nearby. He spotted his contact, a man who looked like he'd been punched by life and hadn't gotten up yet. "Aelric?" the man asked, voice as gritty as his appearance. "In the flesh," Aelric replied, offering a hand. "You must be Jarvis." Jarvis ignored the hand. "You're the mediator. You look more like a librarian who got lost on his way to a protest rally." Aelric chuckled, unoffended. "I've got a knack for showing up where I'm not wanted. Let's talk." They moved to a quieter corner, if such a thing existed in this buzzing monstrosity. Aelric noticed the security cameras perched like vultures in the rafters. Big Brother was alive and well, and he apparently had a fetish for mining operations. "So what's the story?" Aelric asked, leaning against a wall that seemed one sharp cough away from collapse. Jarvis scratched at his beard, a patchwork of gray and regret. "The Harkars. They rule this place like they are the gods of a particularly unpleasant underworld. Miners are pissed, ready to revolt. Problem is, the Harkars are about as flexible as a titanium rod. One wrong move and this rock will be the next asteroid belt addition. And I'm supposed to stop that." Aelric raised an eyebrow. "I've got a degree in conflict resolution, not a death wish. You're here because the last guy had a death wish and got it granted." Jarvis' smile was tighter than a vacuum seal. Aelric sighed, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a cheap polyester blanket. "All right, who do I need to talk to first?" "There's a Harkar overseer, goes by the name Chelrock. Real bastard even by their standard. If you can get him to listen, maybe we can avoid a clusterfuck of cosmic proportions." "Great," Aelric muttered. "I'll add alien diplomacy to my list of doomed ventures." He made his way through the labyrinthine corridors of the cathedral, each turn more oppressive than the last. The walls were adorned with what the Harkars probably considered art, but looked more like the fever dreams of a madman after a bad acid trip. Aelric couldn't decide if he was more unnerved or amused. Eventually, he reached Chelrock's office, a chamber that seemed more fitting for an executioner than an administrator. The alien sat at a desk that looked like it was made out of recycled weaponry, clawed fingers tapping a rhythm that might have been music to ears designed differently than Aelric's. "Human," Chelrock intoned, voice as cold and smooth as a slab of marble. "You come to speak of peace. Peace, prosperity, and anything else that keeps everyone from exploding," Aelric replied, slipping into a chair opposite the alien. "I hear there are issues." Chelrock leaned forward, eyes like molten lead. "The miners are restless. They forget their place." "Funny how people tend to do that when they're treated like livestock," Aelric said with a smile that wasn't at all pleasant. "Their comfort is not our concern," Chelrock said, as if stating an undeniable fact. Aelric forced himself to stay calm, though he wanted to reach across the desk and shake the alien until it rattled. "Here's the thing, Chelrock. You keep pushing, they're gonna push back. And when they do, it's not gonna be pretty. We are prepared for rebellion, Chelrock replied, voice dripping with disdain. We are always prepared. Aelric leaned back, contemplating his options. Diplomacy seemed as futile as reasoning with a brick wall, but he'd try anyway. He always did. Let's say you pacify them this time. What about next time? And the time after that? Sooner or later, you'll have more blood than ore on your hands. Chelrock was silent, a silence that stretched like a taut wire between them. What do you propose, human? Give them something. A gesture. Better rations, a day off. Hell, pretend you care about their survival for 5 minutes. The alien considered him, the stillness inhuman and unnerving. I will. Consider your words. That's all I ask, Aelric replied, feeling a small victory in the massive war. He left the office, his mind already racing with contingency plans, all of them terrible. As he walked back through the corridors, he wondered if this was how he'd die in a cathedral of cold metal, under the rule of an alien regime that saw him as less than a gnat. Jarvis was waiting for him outside. How'd it go? Aelric shrugged. As well as can be expected when you're dealing with a species that thinks empathy is a communicable disease. Jarvis snorted. So epically screwed then. Pretty much, Aelric agreed, but there might be a sliver of hope. Hope, Jarvis said, as if the word was foreign. In this place. I know I should wash my mouth out with soap, Aelric replied. But maybe, just maybe, Chelrock isn't as heartless as he wants us to believe. I'll believe it when I see it. Fair enough, Aelric said, glancing out at the vastness of space beyond the docking bay's shielded windows. But until then, we keep trying. As he walked away, Aelric wondered if his optimism was as futile as a snowball in a neutron star. But in the depths of space, hope was a currency he couldn't afford to neglect. And besides, he always did enjoy a good challenge. Aelric Calloway trudged through the space cathedral, trying to keep his thoughts from drifting to the myriad ways he could die here. Alien architecture loomed around him, all sharp angles and sinister curves, like the fever dream of a medieval architect with a grudge against right angles. His mind kept circling back to the miners, their plight a grim reminder that the universe was mostly composed of injustice, hydrogen, and despair. He was heading to the lower levels, where the miners lived and worked. Jarvis had given him a rundown of the situation, but Aelric wanted to see it for himself. Or maybe it was some masochistic urge to confirm just how deep the excrement went. Either way, he had to walk through the grime to really understand the filth. He reached the elevator, a decrepit contraption that looked like it might have been cobbled together from spare parts of less fortunate elevators. The doors clanged open with the subtlety of a gunshot, and Aelric stepped inside, trying not to think too hard about the creaking noises it made as it descended. The lower levels were a different world. Where the upper levels had been sterile and cold, this place was alive with heat and movement. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, metal, and desperation. It was like stepping into the armpit of the universe. Miners moved about, faces smudged with grime and eyes dull with exhaustion. They were ants in an anthill of misery, each one laboring under the weight of the Harkar Dominion's thumb. Aelric watched them, feeling a pang of something dangerously close to empathy. He spotted a miner leaning against a wall, his posture screaming fatigue. Aelric approached, figuring he might as well start somewhere. "Hey," Aelric said, offering a nod. "You got a minute?" The miner looked up, eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Depends. You selling something? If I was, I'd be selling the idea that this is all worth it, and that's a pretty tough sell," Aelric replied, one side of his mouth quirking up in a half-smile. The miner snorted. "Name's Quillen. What do you want, suit?" "Aelric, and not much for suits. They itch," Aelric said, glancing around. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial tone. "I'm the mediator. Here to try and stop this place from going kaboom." Quillen's laugh was more of a bark. "Good luck with that. The only thing stopping this place from blowing is the fact that we're too damn tired to start a fire." "Yeah, I got that impression," Aelric said. "What's your take on it all?" Quillen shrugged, a world-weary gesture that spoke volumes. We work, they crack the whip. We protest, they crack harder. It's like talking to a wall, except walls don't usually have guns. Charming bunch, aren't they? Like a warm boot to the face, Quillen agreed. But you didn't come down here to hear me bitch. Aelric shrugged. Actually, that's exactly why I'm here. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Quillen's eyes flicked around the corridor like he expected a Harkar to pop out of the shadows. You really want to know? Come see for yourself. Aelric followed Quillen through a maze of tunnels, each one more oppressive than the last. The walls were scarred and battered, much like the souls who walked them. They reached an open area where miners were gathered, their faces hard and eyes sharper than any tools they wielded. The air buzzed with a quiet intensity, a simmering anger just waiting for a spark. This is where the magic happens, Quillen said, voice dipped in sarcasm. Or as close to magic as you can get in a hellhole. Aelric took it all in. The machinery was old, the kind you'd find in a museum if museums were interested in showcasing the slow grind of human misery. It groaned and shuddered with every movement, a testament to the Harkar's care for their workforce, which was to say none. Is it always this? Pleasant? Aelric asked. Quillen smirked. Nah, sometimes it's actually unpleasant. Aelric shook his head, the enormity of the task ahead sinking in. It's a wonder you're still standing. We do what we gotta. Most of us don't have a choice, Quillen said, his voice tinged with bitterness. But you already knew that. Aelric nodded, feeling the weight of the miner's gaze on him. What do you want to happen? A bitter laugh escaped Quillen's lips. We want to live, not just survive, maybe even dream about something more than making it to the next day. Dreams are dangerous, Aelric said almost to himself. But necessary. Quillen looked at him, eyes searching. You believe that? Aelric sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I have to, otherwise what's the point? Quillen grunted. You talk like someone who believes they can make a difference. Yeah, I'm delusional like that, Aelric replied. But maybe between my delusions and your reality we can find something that works. Quillen studied him for a moment, then nodded. We'll see. But if you're serious, we could use someone with a voice louder than a pickaxe. I'll do what I can, Aelric promised, wondering if he'd just signed up for more trouble than he could handle. As they made their way back through the corridors, Aelric couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to these miners. It was a feeling he hadn't expected, but one he couldn't deny. Somewhere along the way their fight had become his, and he wasn't sure if that was a stroke of genius or a prelude to disaster. Jarvis was waiting for him when he emerged back into the upper levels, looking like he'd been chewing rocks for fun. Well, did you find what you were looking for? Aelric nodded. In a manner of speaking. Meaning, I found a whole world of hurt and not much else, Aelric said. But I think there's a chance. Jarvis raised an eyebrow. A chance of what? Surviving long enough to see the next paycheck. Something like that, Aelric said, not wanting to get into the specifics of his burgeoning sense of responsibility. What's the word on the Harkars? Any movement? Jarvis scratched his chin. Chelrock's likely thinking about what you said, but don't hold your breath. They're not known for quick decisions unless it involves shooting first. Figures, Aelric muttered. But maybe if we keep the miners calm, we can buy some time. Time for what? Aelric shrugged. Hell if I know, but better than the alternative. Jarvis chuckled, a dry sound. You know, most mediators don't stick their neck out this far. Might even say you're an idiot. Wouldn't be the first time, Aelric said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. But I've got a soft spot for lost causes. So, what's next? Jarvis asked, leaning against a wall with all the grace of a collapsing star. We wait. See if the Harkars give even a fraction of a damn. In the meantime, I'll keep talking to the miners. Maybe we can keep this powder keg from blowing. And if it does blow, Aelric shrugged, the weight of his decision pressing down like a cosmic joke he wasn't laughing at. Then I guess I'll find out if there's life after death. Jarvis nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. You're either brave or stupid. Maybe both. Probably both, Aelric admitted. But at least I'm consistent. With that, Aelric turned away, his mind a whirlwind of strategies and half-formed plans. He knew this was going to be ugly, knew it in every fiber of his being. But something inside him was stirring, a determination he hadn't felt in years. As he walked back to his quarters, he thought about the miners, their faces etched with the kind of resolve that only came from having nothing left to lose. And he thought about Quillen, a man trying to find a sliver of hope in a universe that seemed determined to crush it. Maybe it was madness, but Aelric felt a flicker of hope. And in a place like this, hope was as rare as compassion in a Harkar. But it was there, flickering in the darkness, a tiny flame against the vast void. He'd do what he could to nurture it, even if it meant lighting himself on fire in the process. Because sometimes, the only way to drive out the darkness was to let it consume you and hope you could hold on long enough to come out the other side. Back in his quarters, Aelric couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something monumental. And for once, he wasn't afraid to take the leap. The elevator groaned like an old man after a night of cheap booze as Aelric replayed the miners' grim faces in his mind. The lower levels were a pressure cooker, and he'd somehow become the reluctant chef. He'd need more than a spatula to turn this mess into something palatable. So, what's the plan, fearless leader? Jarvis's voice, sharper than a Harkar's sense of entitlement, cut through Aelric's thoughts. Aelric shrugged. Do I look like a man with a plan? I'm more of a wing it and pray kind of guy, Jarvis snorted. Great, because nothing says success like blind optimism. They strolled through the docking bay, a hive of activity where humans bustled with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for root canal appointments. Aelric couldn't help but notice the subtle undercurrent of despair, like everyone here was just waiting for the other shoe or boot, as Quillen would have it, to drop. His musings were interrupted by the unmistakable rumble of an explosion. The shockwave rippled through the bay, and Aelric, driven by instinct, ducked behind a nearby crate. Jarvis joined him, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. The latter was probably due to the fact that nothing ever happened around here unless it involved someone getting blown up. Guess we're not having that quiet day we talked about, Aelric muttered, dusting off his coat. Quieter than usual. Only one explosion so far, Jarvis quipped, peering over the crate. When the dust settled, Aelric and Jarvis cautiously emerged to a scene of chaos. Miners spilled out from the lower levels, some limping, others supporting the wounded. Whatever had just happened, it had stirred the hornet's nest. Quillen appeared, his face set in a grim mask. You better come see this, he said, cutting through the noise with the efficiency of a scalpel. Aelric followed, his stomach twisting in anticipation of what lay ahead. They reached the heart of the explosion, a jagged hole where machinery once stood, now a smoking ruin. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt metal and something worse, the coppery tang of blood. How bad? Aelric asked, steeling himself against the horror. Bad enough, Quillen replied, his voice hard. A few didn't make it. Aelric's gaze swept over the scene, taking in the huddled groups of shell-shocked miners. Survivors bore expressions that ranged from stunned disbelief to simmering rage. The Harkar Dominion had done it again, pushed their luck and the miners' patience to the breaking point. What happened? Aelric asked, knowing the answer wouldn't be pretty. Negligence, Quillen spat, his anger a palpable force. They knew the equipment was faulty, but did they care? Hell no. Aelric rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the weight of the miners' expectant stares. Was this how it felt to stand at the front lines, trying to fend off impending doom with nothing but a toothpick and a smile? Quillen gestured to the crowd. These folks are ready to fight, but they need more than just a pickaxe and a prayer. Aelric nodded. And let me guess, they're looking at me like I'm the second coming of some kind of savior. Pretty much, Quillen said, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. You've got a knack for stumbling into leadership roles. Great, Aelric muttered, the sarcasm thick enough to cut with a knife. Just what I needed, a responsibility complex. He turned to the crowd, raising his voice to be heard over the murmurs. All right, listen up. I know things are bad, worse than bad, but going off half-cocked isn't going to solve anything. A miner with a bandage wrapped around his head spoke up, his voice a mix of defiance and desperation. So what do we do, eh? Just sit here and wait for the next accident to take us out? No, Aelric said, shaking his head. We organize. We show the Harkars we're more than just bodies to throw at their problems. Organize, another miner scoffed. We've tried that, they don't care. Maybe they don't, Aelric admitted, his tone softening. But if we can get enough attention, make enough noise, someone has to listen. And if they don't, Quillen asked, folding his arms. Aelric forced a grin. Then we make sure they wish they had. The crowd's response was a mix of cautious optimism and lingering doubt. But Aelric saw a spark there, buried beneath the layers of grime and hopelessness. It was a start. Later, as the adrenaline faded, Aelric found himself alone in a corner of the bay, trying to grapple with the mess he'd waded into. He had no illusions about the odds, stacked higher than the Harkar's profit margins, but there was something to be said for the power of desperation. Jarvis sidled up, handing him a flask. For courage or stupidity, take your pick. Aelric took a swig, the fiery liquid burning a path down his throat. Thanks. I'll need all the help I can get. You really think this'll work? Jarvis asked, skepticism lacing his words. Aelric shrugged. Who knows, but I'd rather go down swinging than sit on my hands. Fair point, Jarvis conceded. Just try not to get yourself killed. You're the best shot we've got. Aelric chuckled, the sound rusty from disuse. Now that's a sobering thought. As the makeshift camp settled into a tense quiet, Aelric couldn't shake the feeling he'd just signed on for more than he bargained for. But then, wasn't that how all great disasters started? With one poor fool thinking they could make a difference. Sleep was a distant dream, so he wandered the corridors, the weight of the miner's hope a constant shadow. He'd never asked to be a leader, never wanted it. But here he was, facing the abyss with nothing but a ragtag group of miners and a whole lot of unresolved issues. He found Quillen in the maintenance bay, fiddling with a piece of equipment that looked like it had seen better centuries. The man was a study in contrasts, his rough exterior hiding an astute mind that Aelric had come to respect. Couldn't sleep either, Quillen asked without looking up. Too many thoughts, Aelric admitted, leaning against the wall. Quillen smirked. Welcome to my world. Aelric watched as Quillen worked, his hands deftly maneuvering the machinery. You ever think about getting out of here? Every damn day, Quillen replied. But where would I go? The universe isn't exactly rolling out the welcome mat for folks like us. True, Aelric said, the words heavy with shared understanding. But maybe, just maybe, we can change that. Quillen paused, meeting Aelric's gaze. You really believe that? I have to, Aelric replied, a tired smile playing on his lips. Otherwise, what's the point? Hope's a dangerous thing, Quillen said, returning his attention to the machine. Yeah, but it's all we've got, Aelric said, resigned to the madness of their situation. As the Iors slipped by, Aelric found himself drawn into the miner's world, a world of grit, grime, and grudging camaraderie. Slowly, he realized he'd become something of a symbol, a beacon in the dark. And though the weight of expectation was suffocating, he couldn't deny the flicker of purpose it brought. When dawn, or the closest thing to it in this forsaken place, arrived, the camp was abuzz with activity. The explosion had been the catalyst, and now determination simmered beneath the surface. Quillen approached, his face set with grim resolve. We're ready, he said, the words carrying more weight than Aelric cared to acknowledge. All right, Aelric replied, feeling the gravity of the situation settle around him. Let's see if we can make some noise. As they moved through the corridors, miners joined their ranks, the collective footfall echoing like a heartbeat. It was a ragtag army, but it was theirs, and that was enough. They reached the upper levels, where the Harkar overseers lounged, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their feet. Aelric felt a surge of adrenaline, the certainty that they had to act and act now. Time to crash the party, Quillen said, his voice tinged with a hint of relish. Aelric nodded, stepping forward to address the Harkars. Morning, gentlemen, we'd like to have a word. The overseers sneered, their disdain palpable. And who might you be? Someone who's tired of your crap, Aelric replied, his words punctuated by the miners' unified presence. Not interested, the lead overseer said, turning away dismissively. Aelric's patience snapped, his voice ringing out with authority he barely recognized. "You should be. We're done playing by your rules. Either you listen or we make you listen." The overseer, taken aback by the audacity, hesitated. It was a small victory, but one that sent a ripple through the miners, emboldening them. Quillen stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "We're not asking for favors, just fairness. You ignore us at your peril." As the overseers conferred in hushed tones, Aelric felt the tide shifting, the balance of power teetering ever so slightly. It was a dangerous game, but one they were compelled to play. Aelric met Quillen's gaze, a silent agreement passing between them. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together, for better or worse. In that moment, amidst the tension and uncertainty, Aelric realized he was in far too deep to back out now. And maybe, just maybe, this was exactly where he needed to be. Because in a universe built on injustice, hydrogen, and despair, sometimes all it took was a spark to light the way. Aelric awoke to the delightful sound of boots stomping, the dull clink of metal on metal, a symphony of annoyance. It was like waking up to find a boot on your face, not gently resting there, but grinding in just to remind you that life was as unfair as it was relentless. Aelric struggled to his feet, rubbing sleep from his eyes and facing the day with the enthusiasm of a man attending his own execution. The Harkar Dominion had sent their enforcers to the Space Cathedral, and these weren't the regular, underpaid goons with a penchant for forgetting which end of the blaster was which. No, these were the real deal, the kind that made you wish for the simpler days of mere negligence and exploding machinery. "Morning, sunshine," Jarvis greeted, his voice dripping with a sarcasm as potent as the coffee Aelric desperately needed. "Looks like we've got company." "Yeah, I noticed," Aelric grumbled, squinting at the crowd of miners who, despite their exhaustion, had gathered as if drawn to the spectacle of their impending doom. "Just what we needed, more boots to drop," Jarvis snorted, his smirk as sharp as a razor blade. "And here I thought we could schedule a picnic." Aelric had the grace to chuckle, though it felt like swallowing sandpaper. "Guess it's time for another rousing speech, huh?" Quillen joined them, his expression a mix of grim determination and that lingering hope Aelric had come to both admire and resent. More like a miracle. Aelric waved his hand, gathering the miners' attention. "All right, folks, listen up. Looks like the Harkars have sent us some new playmates. You know, in case the last ones weren't enough to ruin your day." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of fear and the kind of dark humor that came from looking death in the face and giving it the finger. "What do we do, boss?" one of the miners asked, a young woman with a fire in her eyes that made Aelric wish he could bottle it for later. "We play nice." "For now," Aelric said, holding up a hand to forestall the rising tide of objections. "But we don't stop pushing. We've got to make them think we're not worth the trouble." Quillen nodded, leaning in. "We're gonna have to give them a show they won't forget." "Great," Jarvis piped up. "Shall we sing Cumbea while we're at it?" Aelric rubbed his temples, feeling a headache brewing. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." "Anyone have a plan that doesn't involve inciting a massacre?" There was a pause before a gray-haired miner, one whose wrinkles had wrinkles, spoke up. "We could pretend to comply, keep him happy while we figure out our next move." Aelric considered it. Complying wasn't a long-term solution, but it might buy them time. "All right, we play along. But we keep our eyes open for any chance to tip the scales." Jarvis gave a low whistle. "I always knew you had a death wish." "Just trying to make the best of a terrible situation," Aelric replied with a humorless grin. "Besides, if I didn't, you'd think I'd gone soft." The miners dispersed, the weight of the Harkar's presence hanging over them like a particularly malevolent cloud. Aelric watched them go, feeling the pressure of their hopes and fears pressing down on him like a vice. Quillen clapped him on the shoulder. "We're with you, you know, no matter how deep this rabbit hole goes." Aelric nodded, grateful for the solidarity. "Let's just hope it doesn't lead straight to hell." As the day wore on, the Harkar enforcers made their presence known. They strutted through the corridors with the kind of arrogance that only came from knowing they were untouchable, or thought they were. Aelric did his best to keep the miners in line, a task akin to herding cats through a minefield. At midday, when the artificial lights dimmed to simulate a false dusk, Aelric found himself cornered by one of the overseers, a greasy-haired man with the charm of a malfunctioning airlock. "Callaway, isn't it?" the overseer drawled, his voice like oil on water. "Depends on who's asking," Aelric replied, crossing his arms. The man chuckled, a sound that made Aelric's skin crawl. "You're stirring up quite the commotion. Dominion doesn't like it when the riffraff gets ideas." "Just trying to keep the peace," Aelric said, injecting as much sincerity into his tone as he could muster. "Peace is good," the overseer agreed, though the way he said it made Aelric wonder if the man had ever known a peaceful moment in his life. "Just remember who's in charge here." Aelric forced a smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm well aware. You make it hard to forget." With a dismissive wave, the overseer sauntered off, leaving Aelric feeling like he needed a shower. Preferably one that involved a high-pressure hose and industrial-strength soap. "You handled that well," Jarvis commented, appearing at his side as if conjured by the overseer's slime trail. "Yeah, I think I deserve a medal," Aelric replied, wiping his hands on his trousers as though to rid them of the encounter. "Or at least a stiff drink. Don't tempt me." As the day dragged on, word of the Dominion's increased presence spread like wildfire, fueling the miners' anger. Aelric found himself playing diplomat, a role he was about as suited for as a fish to dry land. But somehow, through charm, sarcasm, and sheer bloody-mindedness, he managed to keep a lid on the simmering pot. That evening, as he sat nursing a cup of something that claimed to be coffee but tasted like burnt disappointment, Quillen approached with a grim look on his face. "We've got a problem," Quillen said, sliding into the seat across from Aelric. "Just one," Aelric replied, though the humor was forced. "The enforcers are planning something. I overheard one of them talking about making an example out of someone." Aelric's stomach dropped, the coffee turning to ash in his mouth. "Any idea who?" Quillen shook his head. "But you can bet it'll be someone high-profile. They want to remind us who's boss." "Fantastic," Aelric muttered. "Just when I thought things couldn't get any better." "We need a plan," Quillen said, urgency in his voice. Aelric leaned back, contemplating their options. "Maybe it's time to give them something else to think about." "Like what?" "Distraction," Aelric said, the idea forming as he spoke. "Something to keep them busy while we figure out our next move." "Care to elaborate?" Jarvis asked, sliding into the seat beside Quillen. "What if we stage a little incident?" Aelric suggested. "Something that'll keep them off our backs without getting anyone killed," Quillen frowned. "You want to poke the bear, the one with the big teeth and bad attitude," Aelric sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not saying it's a great plan, but it's something." Jarvis tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Could work if we're careful, make it look like an accident." Aelric nodded slowly. "An accident might buy us more time." "Throw them off the scent." Quillen considered it, then nodded. "All right, but we need to be damn sure it doesn't blow up in our faces." "Good thing we're experts in not blowing things up," Aelric said dryly. With the plan set, Aelric set to work rallying the miners who could keep a secret, which, to his surprise, was more than he expected. Together, they orchestrated a small-scale sabotage, a malfunction in the machinery that, while harmless, would send the enforcers scrambling. True to form, the next day saw the overseers in a flurry of confusion and frustration, barking orders and pointing fingers. Aelric watched the chaos unfold with a grim satisfaction, knowing it was only a temporary reprieve, but one they desperately needed. As the dust settled, Aelric found himself standing alongside Quillen and Jarvis, watching the enforcers scurry about like ants whose hill had been kicked over. It was a small victory, but in their world they took what they could get. "Nicely done," Quillen said, a rare smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, we're still breathing, so that's a win in my book," Jarvis added, clapping Aelric on the back. Aelric allowed himself a moment of triumph, knowing full well it wouldn't last. The Dominion would come down harder, and when they did, they needed to be ready. "Let's not get too comfortable," Aelric warned. "This is just the beginning." For now, they basked in the knowledge that for once, They'd been the ones doing the pushing. And as the enforcers scrambled to regain control, Aelric felt a flicker of hope, a dangerous, fragile thing in a universe where nothing was guaranteed. Hope might be dangerous, but so was desperation. And Aelric had long since learned that when the chips were down, he'd rather be the one with nothing left to lose. As the false night descended once more on the space cathedral, Aelric and his companions huddled together, planning their next move. The future was as uncertain as ever, but with every step, they inched a little closer to the one thing that had always eluded them: freedom, even if it killed them. The artificial night cast a dreary haze over the space cathedral, the kind of dim lighting that was perfect for wallowing in self-pity. Aelric Calloway was doing just that, sitting in his quarters with a drink that tasted like regret but was probably just bad synth whiskey. He'd managed to keep things from spiraling out of control for now. But the uncertainty of their next move hung over him like a guillotine blade. "You're brooding again," Jarvis said, lounging in the corner, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Should I call a therapist, or just pour you another glass?" Aelric grimaced. "If I wanted a therapist, I'd shoot myself in the foot and call it a day. I'll take the drink." Jarvis chuckled, a sound that was more comforting than it had any right to be. "You're a real ray of sunshine, you know that. Just trying to keep up with you, Jarvis." The quip hung in the air, a thin veneer over the growing tension. The miners had managed to keep their heads down, but everyone knew it was a matter of time before the Harkar Dominion pushed back. The overseers were like vultures, circling, waiting for the first sign of weakness. The knock on the door was almost a relief, a distraction from the oppressive silence. Aelric opened it to find Quillen standing there, looking like he'd just seen a ghost, or worse, a tax collector. "Aelric," Quillen started, his voice low and urgent. "We've got trouble." "Join the club," Aelric muttered. "Got a membership card and everything." Quillen stepped inside, closing the door with a grim finality. "They've taken someone." Aelric felt his stomach turn to lead. "Who?" His suspicions were confirmed by the look on Quillen's face. It was like watching hope being strangled to death. "Me." "What?" Aelric blinked, momentarily thrown. "You're standing right in front of me." Quillen nodded, frustration etched into every line of his face. "They've taken my sister." The words hit Aelric like a freight train. He knew what it meant to Quillen, the sister who was his only family, the one he'd done this all for. The miners' morale, already delicate, would shatter if the Dominion made an example of her. "They're planning a public execution," Quillen continued, each word like a nail in their coffin. "To remind us who's in charge." "Fantastic," Jarvis said from the corner, his sarcasm tinged with genuine anger. "Nothing like a bit of light entertainment to boost morale." Aelric ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. "We can't let this happen. It'll destroy everything we've built." "Then we do something," Quillen said, his voice fierce, but there was a tremor there, a hint of desperation. Aelric had always believed in finding another way, in outsmarting rather than outgunning. But this was different. This was personal. "We need a plan," he said finally, though his mind was already racing with possibilities. "Or a miracle," Jarvis added, not unkindly. "Because those are real easy to come by." Ignoring the jibe, Aelric paced the room. "We need to get her out before the execution, but if we're seen, it's over." Quillen's eyes were hard, his resolve like steel. "I'm with you." "Whatever it takes." Aelric nodded, his mind a whirl of strategies and contingencies. There was only one shot at this, and failure wasn't an option, not when the stakes were this high. The plan was simple. So simple, Aelric half expected it to collapse under the weight of its own audacity. The execution was set for the public square, a grim spectacle designed to cow the miners into submission. But Aelric had a different idea. "All right, listen up," he said, addressing the small group they'd gathered. Miners who could keep a secret, who wouldn't flinch when things got ugly. "We're going to create a diversion, something big enough to draw the enforcers away while we get Quillen's sister out." "And by big, you mean?" one of the miners asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Big enough to make the overseers wet themselves," Jarvis answered, grinning. "I think we can manage that." Quillen was scanning the faces of their ragtag crew, his determination a palpable force. "They'll expect something, but not from us. Not right under their noses." Aelric nodded. "We'll use the maintenance tunnels. The enforcers won't expect a move from below, because nobody's stupid enough to try it," Jarvis noted, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Which is why this might just work." The plan was set in motion, and as the execution time drew near, tension mounted to an unbearable pitch. Aelric felt it in his bones, the weight of life and death, the knowledge that one misstep would mean disaster. "Remind me why we're doing this again," Jarvis whispered as they crept through the dimly lit tunnels. "Because we're idiots," Aelric replied, though he knew the answer was much more complicated. Freedom was a word bandied around too freely, like a carrot on a stick, always just out of reach. But for Quillen, for his sister, it was real. It was worth the risk. The public square loomed ahead, the sound of the gathered crowd a low murmur of anticipation. The execution platform was set, a grim reminder of the Dominion's iron grip. "Timing is everything," Aelric said, more to himself than anyone else. "We wait for the signal." Jarvis was fiddling with a makeshift detonator, his fingers steady despite the stakes. "Here's hoping this works." "I'd hate to die because of a dud." Aelric shot him a look. "Your optimism is inspiring." Jarvis just grinned, a flash of teeth in the darkness. "That's why you keep me around." The plan was simple, but it required a precision they weren't guaranteed. Aelric scanned the scene, his eyes drawn to the platform where Quillen's sister stood, flanked by enforcers. Her face was a mask of defiance, and Aelric felt a surge of respect. "Ready?" Quillen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Aelric nodded. "As I'll ever be." Jarvis counted down, his voice a calm anchor in the mounting storm. 3, 2, 1. The explosion rocked the square, a controlled detonation that sent the crowd into a frenzy. Smoke billowed, obscuring vision, and the enforcers scrambled, barking orders and brandishing weapons. "Now!" Aelric shouted, surging forward with Quillen at his side. The chaos was their ally, each step measured, each action deliberate. The platform was a blur of movement, and Aelric's focus narrowed, tunneling in on their goal. Quillen's sister, eyes wide with shock, was suddenly unguarded, her captors drawn away by the bedlam. Aelric reached her, ripping the restraints away with a newfound strength he hadn't known he possessed. "We're getting you out of here," he said, though she needed no convincing. Quillen's expression was a mix of relief and urgency as they moved, slipping through the cracks in the Dominion's armor with a deftness born of necessity. "Keep moving," Aelric barked, herding the group through the smoke, his heart a relentless drumbeat in his chest. The escape was a blur, a dance of shadows and deception, and for a fleeting moment Aelric allowed himself to hope. But hope was a dangerous thing. It dulled the edges, softened the blow when reality came crashing down. They emerged on the other side, breathless but alive, the realization sinking in like a bomb. They'd done it. They'd won. For now. The aftershocks of their victory rippled through the miners, a renewed spark in their eyes. But Aelric knew better than to rest easy. The Dominion would retaliate, and when they did, it would be with a vengeance. Quillen was reunited with his sister, the relief in his eyes enough to make Aelric look away. It was too raw, too real, a mirror to his own fears and failures. "Thanks," Quillen said, the word inadequate but heartfelt. "I owe you." "You owe me nothing," Aelric replied, though he felt the weight of the promise between them. "Just keep fighting." Jarvis sidled up, a smirk on his lips. "So, when's the next life-threatening adventure? Because I think I've developed a taste for them." Aelric chuckled, though it was a tired sound. "Let's try to survive this one first." The space cathedral was once more shrouded in its artificial night, but for the first time in a long time, Aelric felt a flicker of something close to peace. They'd taken a stand, and for now, that was enough. As he and Jarvis walked the dim corridors, the reality of their situation settled in. Hope was a dangerous thing, yes. But so was Aelric Calloway when he had nothing left to lose. "Think we'll make it?" Jarvis asked, his voice light but the question heavy. Aelric shrugged, a smile ghosting across his lips. "One way or another, Jarvis, one way or another." and as the false night closed in, Aelric found himself hoping that, against all odds, they might just win. Not because they were smarter or stronger, but because they had something the Harkar Dominion didn't understand. They had nothing left to lose. Aelric Calloway had always found the word plan to be a bit optimistic, especially in their current situation. In the grand game of tactics, most plans ended up like synth whiskey. They looked good on paper but left a sour taste in your mouth. Yet here he was, standing in the underbelly of the Space Cathedral, playing architect to a scheme that could either save them or ensure their extinction. The miners, shadows in the dimly lit corridors, were a motley crew of individuals who had more in common with rats than revolutionaries. But desperation was a powerful motivator, and Aelric knew that well enough to exploit it. The Harkar Dominion might have been the big bad wolf, huffing and puffing, but Aelric was betting on the fact that even the biggest bad wolf had its blind spots. "All right, team," he said, his voice dripping with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for funeral directors. "We're about to do something monumentally stupid. Isn't that our specialty?" Jarvis quipped from his side, fiddling with a device that looked suspiciously like it might explode if you leaned on it too hard. Aelric couldn't help but smile at the gallows humor. "Yes, Jarvis, it's nice to know we've found our calling." Quillen hovered nearby, his demeanor tense as a coiled spring. His sister's life hung in the balance, and while Aelric was used to dealing with the weight of potential failure, he knew this was personal. Personal had a way of turning people into irrational idiots, willing to risk everything for one person. Funny how the universe's biggest motivator was usually an even bigger liability. "How's everyone feeling about crawling through tunnels that make a rat's arse look spacious?" Aelric asked, his attempt at levity landing somewhere between inspiring and suicidal. A miner, a woman whose name Aelric vaguely remembered as Marnie, snorted. "Just another day at the office, boss." "Right," Aelric said. "Remember, we go in, we get out, quiet as ghosts." "And if we can't be quiet?" someone asked from the back. Jarvis piped up. "Then we become very loud ghosts, with explosives." The plan was simple, yes, but simple hadn't ever guaranteed success. Life was a game of chance, and Aelric was feeling particularly unlucky lately. Yet he pressed forward, leading the group through the labyrinthine underbelly of the Space Cathedral. In a place designed more by accident than intent, it was easy to get lost unless you knew the angles, the dead ends, the shortcuts. "Remember, the enforcers have probably set up guards at key points," Aelric reminded them, his voice low, although in their current mood the reminder was probably unnecessary. "We'll have to be quick, or we're dead. Or worse," Jarvis chimed in. "Captured and subjected to their idea of hospitality." "Noted," Quillen replied, his voice carrying a steely edge. "Let's make sure that doesn't happen." The tunnels stretched out before them like the maw of some great beast, and Aelric felt a familiar thrill of adrenaline. The Space Cathedral was home, as much as any floating piece of rock could be, and they'd use its secrets to their advantage. He led them onward, their footsteps a whisper against the metal flooring. As they approached the public square from below, the murmur of the crowd grew louder, a living thing that pulsed with tension and fear. It was a grim reminder of what awaited them if they failed. Aelric could almost taste the electricity in the air, a cocktail of anxiety and anticipation. "Here we go," he murmured as they reached the final stretch. The plan was set to coincide with the execution, and the timing needed to be impeccable. A crowded square was both a blessing and a curse, providing cover and potential threat in equal measure. Jarvis handed him the detonator, his smile a reassurance of shared madness. "Just like old times," he said. Aelric took it, the weight of it oddly comforting. "Yeah. Except this time, let's not get shot." With a flick of his wrist, Aelric set the plan in motion. The explosion was a precise affair, echoing through the corridors like a symphony of chaos. Smoke and debris filled the air, and the crowd above erupted into panic, scattering like ants underfoot. "Move!" Aelric barked, and the group surged forward, slipping into the chaos like fish in a current. The platform loomed ahead, a grim monolith, but Aelric had eyes only for the prize, Quillen's sister, standing with defiant grace as the world crumbled around them. The enforcers, distracted and disoriented, provided them with the narrowest of openings. Aelric reached her first, a swift movement to sever her bonds, his heart pounding with the thrill of the steel. "You're late," she said, her voice a fierce whisper that cut through the din. Aelric grinned wryly. Fashionably. Quillen was at her side in an instant, and Aelric allowed himself a moment, just a moment of satisfaction. Then reality reasserted itself, and the need to escape became paramount. "Time to go," Jarvis urged, already moving, eyes scanning for danger. They wound their way back through the pandemonium, the smoke and screams a backdrop to their desperate flight. Aelric led them through the winding paths, each corner a potential ambush, every shadow a threat. Back into the bowels of the cathedral they went, the noise of pursuit behind them growing fainter but no less real. When they finally burst into the relative safety of a maintenance shaft, Aelric allowed himself a shaky breath. "Anyone dead?" he asked, his tone more functional than worried. "Not yet," Marnie replied, her face smeared with grime but alive with exhilaration. Quillen's sister, free from her bonds, looked at Aelric with gratitude and something more. "Thank you," she said, and the sincerity in her voice made Aelric uncomfortable. "Don't mention it," he replied, scratching at the back of his neck. "Seriously, ever," Jarvis chuckled, a sound of unexpected relief. "Well, color me impressed. We might just get out of this alive." Aelric shook his head. "Let's not start celebrating just yet. The Dominion's not going to let this slide." They regrouped, exhausted but whole for the moment. The victory felt hollow, knowing the retaliation would be swift and brutal. The Harkar Dominion was nothing if not predictable in its ruthlessness. As they stood in the dim light, Aelric surveyed the faces around him. People he'd come to rely on, to care about, despite his better judgment. They'd pulled off the impossible, but the real test lay ahead, surviving the aftermath. The mood was somber, the adrenaline fading to a dull ache of awareness. The miners exchanged glances, each one knowing what the other was thinking. They'd won a battle, not the war. "What's next?" Quillen asked, his voice steady but his gaze distant, resting on his sister. Aelric sighed, feeling the weight of leadership settle back on his shoulders like an ill-fitting coat. "Now, we prepare for the storm." "Think we can ride it out?" Jarvis asked, ever the optimist in the face of doom. Aelric shrugged. "We've faced worse odds, but let's not pretend this won't get ugly." The group began to disperse, returning to their lives, their roles in the delicate ecosystem of the space cathedral. Aelric lingered, watching them go, each step a reminder of what lay ahead. Jarvis stayed by his side, a constant presence, his humor a balm for the chaos. "You did good, boss," he said, clapping Aelric on the shoulder. Aelric snorted, the sound more a bark than a laugh. "We did lucky is what we did." "Same thing, really," Jarvis replied, grinning. "In this universe, luck's about as good as it gets." The halls of the space cathedral were quiet now, the storm of action replaced by the calm before the inevitable. Aelric walked with Jarvis, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. "How long do you think we have?" Jarvis asked, his tone light but the question heavy. "Days if we're lucky," Aelric replied. "Hours if we're not." The two walked on, the walls of the cathedral closing in around them like the universe's worst-kept secret. But for all the darkness, all the danger, there was a flicker of something else, a stubborn refusal to give in, to let the Dominion dictate their fate. Aelric paused, looking out into the vast nothingness beyond the cathedral's walls. "You know what I hate most about this?" Jarvis arched an eyebrow. "Besides the constant threat of death and destruction." "Yeah," Aelric said, a small smile quirking his lips. "I'm starting to think we might just have a chance." Jarvis laughed, the sound rich and full of life. "A chance, huh? Now that's real dangerous thinking." "Tell me about it," Aelric muttered, but the spark in his eyes was undeniable. As they moved deeper into the labyrinth of the space cathedral, Aelric couldn't shake the feeling that the endgame was approaching. The Dominion would come for them, and when they did, they'd be ready. because hope might be dangerous, but so was desperation, and right now they had plenty of both. In this universe of injustice, hydrogen, and despair, Aelric Calloway was betting on the one thing that had always served him well, the power of sheer bloody-mindedness. Because when you had nothing left to lose, you had everything to fight for, and that made all the difference. "So, enlighten me," Jarvis said, leaning against the cold metal wall of the maintenance shaft, his eyes alight with a mix of mischief and madness. "How exactly do we plan on toppling an entire bloody regime with a handful of miners and a penchant for bad decisions?" Aelric rubbed the bridge of his nose, willing away the headache that had been his constant companion since the day he decided that ignoring the Harkar Dominion's tyranny was no longer an option. "I'm not saying we're toppling anything. I'm just saying we're giving the galaxy a reason to wake up and smell the tyranny." "Ah, rebellion by aromatherapy," Jarvis quipped. "Never thought of that one. Got any other brilliant sense up your sleeve?" "Ode to anarchy, perhaps," Marnie chuckled, her laughter a rough sound that seemed to harmonize with the clanking pipes and wheezing vents around them. "I'm in. As long as we get to see the look on the Dominion's faces when they realize they've been outmaneuvered by a bunch of lowly miners." Quillen, standing a little apart with his sister, cast a glance at Aelric. "You realize they'll come down on us harder than a collapsed mine shaft if we pull this off, right?" Aelric nodded, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on him like a leaden cloak. "At this point, it's not about if they come for us. It's about how many others we can drag into the fight before they do." "Quite the recruitment strategy," Jarvis noted, his grin as sharp as a knife. "Join us or, die horribly in the mines." "Effective, though," Marnie added, her expression pensive. "People are fed up. They're just waiting for someone to show them it's possible to fight back." "Yeah," Quillen agreed, his eyes dark with determination. "And I'm tired of waiting." The conversation was interrupted by a distant rumble, a reminder of the chaos above, where the crowd had been stirred into a frenzy by their daring rescue and the subsequent explosion. Aelric imagined the enforcers scrambling to regain control, their arrogance shattered by the audacity of a few determined souls. It was almost enough to make him smile. "Let's get moving," Aelric said, pushing himself off the wall. "We've got a message to send." The path through the space cathedral was labyrinthine, a twisted mass of corridors and junctions that seemed designed to confound and confuse. But Aelric knew it like the back of his hand, every turn and shortcut committed to memory through years of necessity. As they moved, he could feel the tension in the air, a palpable thing that set his nerves jangling like a broken electric wire. The others felt it too, their eyes scanning the shadows with the wary gaze of prey that knows predators lurk nearby. They reached the comms hub, a cramped room filled with ancient equipment that wheezed and blinked like a geriatric cyborg on its last legs. Aelric eyed the console, its outdated interface a challenge in itself. If they could hijack the communications network, they could broadcast their message far beyond the confines of the space cathedral. "Think you can work your magic, Jarvis?" Aelric asked, stepping aside to let the man through. "Magic?" Jarvis snorted, cracking his knuckles. "More like a series of highly questionable decisions and a willingness to break several intergalactic laws." "Sounds like our entire plan," Marnie said dryly. Jarvis set to work, his fingers flying over the controls with a dexterity born of years spent doing things he shouldn't. The screen flickered, lines of code scrolling by as he worked to bypass the Dominion's firewalls and security protocols. "Piece of cake," Jarvis muttered, though Aelric noted the sweat on his brow. "Just gotta find the right backdoor. Let's hope it's not locked," Quillen said, his tone more hopeful than confident. Minutes ticked by, and Aelric felt the weight of each one as he kept watch at the door, listening for the telltale sounds of enforcers on the move. Anxiety gnawed at his insides, but he forced it down, focusing on the task at hand. Finally, Jarvis let out a triumphant whoop. "We're in." "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Harkar Dominion's very own soapbox. Feel free to express your grievances." Aelric took a deep breath, stepping up to the microphone. His voice, when it came, was steady, though his heart pounded like a war drum in his chest. "This is Aelric Calloway," he began, his words echoing through the comms system. "And if you're hearing this, then you're not alone." He paused, letting the gravity of that sink in. "For too long, we've labored under the Dominion's heel, living in fear of their enforcers, their laws, their control. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can fight back. We can stand together and make them listen." Aelric glanced at his companions, drawing strength from their presence. "We've already shown it's possible. We've defied them and we've survived. Now it's your turn. Rise up wherever you are. Stand against the tyranny because they can't ignore all of us. We are stronger than they think, and it's time they realized that." His voice faltered for a moment, the enormity of what he was doing crashing over him like a tidal wave. But he pushed on, driven by a fierce determination that burned in his veins. "We may be minors, but we are not powerless. We are not voiceless. Our resolve is our weapon, and it's time to wield it." He ended the broadcast, the silence that followed heavy with expectation. Aelric exhaled, feeling the tension in the room dissipate ever so slightly. "Well, that was stirring," Jarvis remarked, his tone a mix of admiration and sarcasm. "Think it'll work?" Aelric shrugged, the doubt creeping back in. "Hope so. Otherwise, we just painted a massive target on our backs for nothing." "Ah, but what a target," Marnie said, her eyes shining with a defiant light. "At least they'll know who they're dealing with." Quillen's sister, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "You think people will listen? That they'll stand up and fight?" Aelric met her gaze, the determination in his eyes mirroring hers. I think they're waiting for someone to show them the way. We just gave them a map." The room fell silent, each of them lost in their thoughts. They had done it. They had thrown down the gauntlet, and now it was up to the galaxy to pick it up. Time passed in a blur, the Iors bleeding into one another as they waited for a response, for any sign that their message had resonated. The tension in the air was palpable, each minute stretching out interminably as they hovered on the edge of something monumental. And then, like the first drops of rain before a storm, the signals began to come in. Voices crackled over the comms, messages from across the galaxy, words of support and determination, declarations of resistance against the Dominion's rule. "We're with you," one voice said, the words crackling through the static. "We've had enough. About time someone stood up to those bastards," another chimed in, the anger laced with a grim hope. "Count us in." The messages poured in, a flood of defiance and solidarity that swept away any lingering doubt. Each voice was a spark, and together they ignited a fire that spread across the stars, a beacon of resistance that could not be ignored. Aelric felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the Harkar Dominion, and the galaxy had answered with a resounding cry of defiance. "Well, I'll be damned," Jarvis said, his voice cracking with emotion. "We actually did it." Marnie grinned, her expression one of fierce triumph. "Guess we're not just a bunch of minors after all." Quillen nodded, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and determination. "We've started something, and now it's up to us to see it through." Aelric looked at each of them in turn, feeling a fierce pride well up within him. They had defied the odds, stood against the might of an empire, and somehow, miraculously, they had prevailed. But even as the messages continued to pour in, a stark reality settled over him. The Dominion would not take this lightly. They would come for them, and when they did, they would have to be ready. "We've got their attention," Aelric said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Now we need to make sure they don't snuff us out before we can fan these flames." "Think we can keep this up?" Jarvis asked, his grin a little shaky but still there, a testament to his indomitable spirit. Aelric took a deep breath, the weight of the galaxy's hopes and dreams pressing down on him, but he refused to buckle under it. "We have to. There's no going back now." The others nodded, their expressions a mixture of determination and resolve. They had taken the first step on a journey that would change everything, and even though the road ahead was fraught with danger, they would face it together. Because in a universe rife with injustice, hydrogen, and despair, they had found something worth fighting for, a chance to change the course of history and forge a future free from tyranny. And as they stood together in the cramped comms hub, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the distant echoes of a galaxy waking up to the call of rebellion, Aelric knew one thing for certain: they were not alone. And together they would make the Dominion pay for underestimating them. The storm had been unleashed, and there was no stopping it now. Aelric Calloway leaned heavily against the cold metal wall, the ache in his head, a familiar companion by now, like an old friend who overstayed his welcome. The distant rumble of unrest still echoed through the corridors of the space cathedral, the sound of a galaxy waking up, stretching its limbs, and realizing it was time to fight back against the oppressive blanket of the Harkar Dominion. He had sparked something, all right, a revolution, without even meaning to bake the damn cake. "Guess we kicked the hornet's nest," Aelric muttered to no one in particular, though he knew the others would hear. "More like we set the whole damn apiary on fire," Jarvis replied, eyes glinting with that familiar mix of mischief and madness. He was fiddling with the device they had used to hijack the comms, turning it over in his hands like a mechanic with a death wish. "You sure we're ready for this crapstorm, boss?" "Ready or not, we're in it now," Aelric said, resisting the urge to rub his temples. "Might as well enjoy the ride." "Enjoyment's not the word I'd use," Marnie chimed in, smirking. "More like survive with style." Aelric let out a dry chuckle. Style wasn't exactly their forte. They were more about cobbled-together plans with a side of desperation. But he couldn't deny that there was something exhilarating in the chaos they'd unleashed, a thrill in knowing they'd rattled the Dominion's cage. Their makeshift headquarters, the maintenance shaft, was quiet now, save for the hum of machinery and the occasional clang of metal. It smelled of oil and sweat, a testament to the hard work that defined their lives as miners and insurgents. "So what now?" Quillen asked, leaning against the wall with the air of someone who'd been through the ringer and had come out the other side, slightly more wrinkled but still standing. "Now," Aelric echoed, pondering the question as if it were an unsolvable riddle. "Now we figure out how to keep this going without getting blasted into space dust." "Sounds like a plan," Quillen said dryly. "Or at least a wishful thought," Aelric shrugged. "Wishful thinking's how most plans start, isn't it?" Quillen's sister, who had been a silent shadow beside her brother, finally spoke up. "Do you really think we started something that can't be stopped?" "Started it, sure," Aelric said, his voice tinged with a mixture of disbelief and grim satisfaction. "Stopping it, though, that's up to the poor souls who've picked up our banner. We just lit the fuse." The responses from across the galaxy had been overwhelming, each message a flicker of hope, a spark in the darkness. And yet, with every flicker came the threat of being snuffed out by the Dominion's ever-watchful eye. Jarvis pushed off the wall, casting a sidelong glance at Aelric. "You know they'll be gunning for you now, right? You're public enemy number one in the Harkar Dominion's Book of Grudges." "Public enemy number one," Aelric repeated with a wry smile. "Not exactly the title I was gunning for, but hey, I'll take it." Marnie crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "You think people are really gonna keep fighting? Even when the Dominion comes down on them harder than a ton of synth whiskey?" Aelric shrugged again, this time with a touch of genuine uncertainty. "People are strange creatures. Takes a lot to get them riled up, but once they are in motion, it's hard to stop them. Besides, we didn't exactly give them a choice, did we?" "True," Marnie conceded. No turning back now. Their little band of rebels had grown, with voices from across the stars echoing their defiance. It was enough to make Aelric feel like a small cog in a much larger machine, a sensation both humbling and terrifying. "Think about it," Jarvis said, his tone mock thoughtful. "We're like the worst version of the heroes they tell stories about. We're the ones who tripped into greatness. Stumbled, more like," Quillen corrected, earning a laugh from the group. As they spoke, the weight of their actions settled over Aelric like a second skin, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. They had sparked a revolution, inadvertently becoming the faces of a movement that could topple an empire. It was a lot for a ragtag group of miners to process. "Jarvis," Aelric said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "You think we can keep this network running without getting caught?" Jarvis grinned, though there was a hint of nervousness in his eyes. "As long as the Dominion keeps underestimating us, we've got a fighting chance. But we'll need to keep moving, stay unpredictable. It's a cat-and-mouse game now, and I'm not planning on being the mouse." "Good," Aelric said with a nod, "because they're gonna come looking, and I'd rather not be around when they do." Quillen's sister stepped forward, her voice steady. "Then we make sure they're always one step behind." Aelric appreciated her confidence, though he wondered if it was misplaced optimism or genuine resolve. "Probably a bit of both," he mused, which was about as good as they could hope for. "Speaking of keeping ahead," Marnie remarked, "we should really think about where we're heading next. Standing still seems like a recipe for getting dead." "Agreed," Aelric said, pushing himself away from the wall. "Let's pack up and get moving. We've got a galaxy to incite." The others set to work, gathering their meager belongings with the efficiency of those who had lived their lives on the edge. Aelric watched them, a strange sense of camaraderie welling up inside him. They weren't just miners anymore. They were something more, something greater, at least until the Dominion crushed them underfoot. But for now, they were free, and that was enough. As they made their way through the maze of corridors, Aelric couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. From discontented workers to reluctant revolutionaries, they'd managed to spark a change that could shake the foundations of an empire. And while the path ahead was fraught with danger, it was also lined with possibilities. "Think they'll remember us?" Jarvis asked, falling into step beside Aelric as they navigated the labyrinthine halls. Aelric snorted. "Depends on if we survive long enough to make the history books." "Well, if we do, I hope they at least get my good side," he replied with a wink. The group reached the docking bay, the familiar bustle of activity a comforting reminder of normalcy. The workers moved with a purposeful energy, their steps lighter, their expressions more determined. "Seems like the message got through," Marnie observed, glancing around at the energized miners. "Yeah," Aelric said, a note of pride in his voice. "We're not alone anymore." The thought was both reassuring and daunting. They had allies now, people willing to fight for their freedom. It was a start, but it was also just the beginning of a long and dangerous road. "Well, let's get to it," Quillen said, gesturing toward their ship. "No point hanging around here." They boarded the ship, the familiar hum of the engines a comfort amidst the chaos. Aelric settled into the captain's chair, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond. "Ready when you are," Jarvis called from the control panel, his fingers dancing over the keys with practiced ease. "All right," Aelric said, taking a deep breath. "Let's see where this ride takes us." The ship lurched forward, leaving the space cathedral behind as they ventured into the unknown. The galaxy stretched out before them, a vast expanse of possibility and peril. And as they traveled, Aelric reflected on what they had accomplished. Against all odds, they had sparked a movement, ignited a flame that couldn't be easily extinguished. It was a testament to the power of ordinary people to effect extraordinary change. In that moment, Aelric found a measure of peace, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they had made a difference. They had stood up to tyranny and inspired others to do the same, and for a group of miners with nothing to lose, that was enough. "Here's to being a thorn in the Dominion's side," Marnie said, raising an imaginary toast. Aelric let out a chuckle, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. "May we continue to be the splinter they can't dig out." Their laughter filled the cabin, a defiant sound that echoed through the ship. They might be outgunned and outnumbered, but they were far from beaten. The Dominion had awoken a giant, and Aelric and his crew were determined to keep it awake. As they hurtled through space, Aelric allowed himself a moment to savor the victory they'd achieved, however fleeting it might be. They had taken a stand, and in doing so, they had given others the courage to do the same. The storm they'd unleashed was still raging, and there was no telling where it would lead. But as long as they had each other, and as long as they had something to fight for, they would face whatever came next with grit and determination. Because in a universe filled with injustice, hydrogen, and despair, they had found a cause worth fighting for, a future where freedom wasn't just a dream, but a reality. And as they sailed through the stars, leaving a trail of defiance in their wake, Aelric knew one thing for certain: they were not alone. And with that knowledge, they would continue to fight, to resist, and to endure. The galaxy was waking up, and they were at the forefront of a new dawn. Together, they would make the Dominion pay for underestimating the power of hope. The revolution had begun, and it wasn't going to end anytime soon.